Hospital number 9, a corridor without end. In 1908, in a small town south of Warsaw, Poland, there stood Hospital number 9, which had long gained a bad reputation among the locals. Built in the 1940s, this hospital was designed for the seriously ill and those who could not receive care in other medical facilities. It became home to the most difficult cases, where patients were given only a last chance for survival. Over time, the hospital became a place where even nurses and doctors began to whisper about unexplained events that became more and more frequent. Screams coming from empty wards, strange sounds like whispers or footsteps following you down the corridors. All of this became part of the daily life of the staff. And although many tried to explain these phenomena by fatigue or stress, every year the myths about the hospital became more real, and it became harder and harder to dare to work here. Anita, a young nurse, worked night shifts on the 3rd floor of the hospital, where the most serious patients were kept. Patients with incurable diseases who had no chance of surviving. Her duties went as usual until that fateful evening. It was one of those nights when there was not a single cloud in the sky, and the air was heavy, as if a black shadow was hanging over the town. At 2:30 a.m., a signal from room 305, which was usually empty after the last patient had died a few days earlier, flashed on the monitor on duty. The alarm was repeated over and over again, which made Anita alert. At first, she thought it might be a technical problem, but her heart told her otherwise. She took the keys and, although she felt some fear, went to the ward. When she entered, everything looked familiar. Old furniture, a cleanly made bed, but something was wrong. A black phone on the bedside table caught her attention. This phone was long out of order and had long since been replaced by newer models. But this phone, as Anita came closer, suddenly rang. In her surprise, Anita dropped the keys she was holding and picked up the phone. She could barely hear the words on the other end. "Can you see me?" Her heart froze in her chest, and a cold sweat ran down her back. She could not recover, but what she saw in the mirror shocked her even more. Behind her, clearly reflected in the mirror, stood a man in hospital pajamas. His face was covered with deep, indistinct scars, and his eyes, which absorbed everything around him, had no human expression. Anita turned sharply, but the room was empty. Feeling that something was wrong, she ran out of the room and ran to the duty officer's post. But the further she went, the longer and darker the corridor seemed. The lamps in the corridors began to go out one by one, and she found herself in a darkness that seemed alive. Her every step was accompanied by soft whispers. At first it was just a rustling, then the voices became clearer. Her name was pronounced calmly but ominously, as if in a whisper coming from the darkness. With each step, the corridor grew larger and larger, and Anita could not find the end. She could feel her heart beating faster with every movement, and then the same figure appeared again at the end of the corridor. The man in the hospital pajamas, now with his mouth open, as if trying to say something, was walking toward her. His face remained impenetrable, but his eyes absorbed more and more light, and it was more terrifying than any nightmare. He stretched out his arms and whispered, "It's time to go." Anita felt all her strength leaving her. She started to scream, but her voice was swallowed up by silence. Disoriented, she fell to the floor, not remembering how she got there. The next morning, the nurses found her sitting on the floor outside room 305, hugging her knees tightly and repeating the same words over and over again. "He won't let go." Anita was transferred to a psychiatric clinic, but it did not help. A few months later, she mysteriously disappeared, her traces vanishing as if she had never existed. Hospital number 9 was closed a few years later, but locals still say that even after that, the building was not empty. Those who dare to approach the hospital can hear the ringing of a telephone coming from the dark corridors. Those who decide to come closer hear the voice again. "Are you ready?" And no one can explain why this call comes every night or who is on the other end. Everyone who has heard this call at least once no longer dares to approach the abandoned hospital. Is this another trap for those who are too brave to find the answer? Translated with Depot.com, free version. Thank you for watching this story. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss any new creepy legends and mystical tales. There's a lot more to come, so stay tuned and be ready for more encounters with the unknown. Look out for the next story.